Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a balloon sleeve sweater. This regal sweater is big on comfort, sporting a ginormous balloon sleeve, a feminine chest detail courtesy of the Suzette stitch, and a slightly plunging neckline that's perfect for wearing a necklace or two. Speaking of, if you're looking to make the perfect dress to pair with a necklace or a top to pair with your favorite pair of earrings, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet designs and patterns that pair well with everything you can think of with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado, for this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 650 grams of yarn, and that is 1,000 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite candle brand. I don't think I have one just yet, but we did just get a Yankee candle and it's going pretty well so far. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making an even number chain that is the width of the base of your neck. I need 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 22. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now we're going to do a half double crochet row. So into that chain that we blocked off, we're going to insert our hook in through there or into the 3rd chain from our hook with 1 half double crochet. Let's do the next one together. Yarn over, insert your hook into that next chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. And continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. Now that we have our row 1 finished, let's get started on our row 2. So at the end of every row, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. Getting started on our row 2 or any even number row, we're going to start with 1 half double crochet into that first stitch. And then to get a nice dividing stitch, we're going to be doing 1 front post extended double crochet, working into the 2nd half double crochet from our previous row. So we're all going to yarn over. We're going to find that 2nd half double crochet. This is my 1st, this is my 2nd. Next, we're going to bring our hook down underneath the body of that 2nd half double crochet and bring our hook through the other side. Next, we're going to yarn over and pull through. To do our extended double crochet, all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through that first loop on our hook to still have 3 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over, pull through 2. Now our dividing stitch is finished. And now, until we reach the end of the row, we're going to be doing Suzette stitches. So we're going to be skipping 1 stitch from our previous row because this front post extended double crochet counts as that stitch, and then into the next we're going to do our first Suzette stitch set, which is just a single crochet and a double crochet into that same stitch. So into that next available stitch, we're going to insert with 1 single, and then also with 1 double crochet. And that is our first Suzette stitch set. Let's do another one together. We're always going to skip 1 stitch right after a Suzette stitch set because that double crochet actually counts as that stitch. If we work into the following stitch, we will be accidentally increasing. So into the next, we're going to insert with a single and a double. Let's just do 1 more together. After that set, we're going to skip 1. Into the next, insert with a single and double crochet, and we're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch set until we have 3 stitches left. We're now at the end of our row 2, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 stitches left. So we still need to end the row with a dividing stitch as well, so that's going to be the same front post extended double crochet that we started the row off with. So let's all yarn over, and finding that second to last half double crochet from our previous row, not counting that chain 2, here's 1, here's 2, insert your hook underneath that second to last half double crochet. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through, and then just like the other one, we're going to yarn over, pull through just the first loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then to close off the row, 1 half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. So yarn over. We are going to be skipping that second to last stitch because this stitch counts as that one. And then we're going to insert with a half double. And that is our row 2 all finished. Now getting started on our row 3, we're all going to chain 2 and flip our work. So now that our work is flipped, working every odd number row, it's going to start with 2 half double crochets. So yarn over, into that first stitch with 1 half double, and then into that next stitch with another half double. So 2 half double crochets to start off our odd number row. And now we're going to do our Suzette stitch sets. And a really quick tip, whenever we're doing our Suzette stitches, now that we're on our second row, our Suzette stitch sets are always going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet stitch to get the texture that we want. So we are skipping that next stitch because it is a double crochet. It's a little bit taller, you can tell. And into that following, insert with a single and a double. And just to do one more, skip that following stitch, and then into the one right after that, a single and a double. And continue this until we have 2 stitches left. We're now at the end of our row 3, so let's close it off. We should all have 2 stitches left. Into that last stitch, we're going to insert with 1 half double crochet. So yarn over, skip that second to last stitch, and into that last stitch, just 1 half double crochet. And that's it. It's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows, so let's just do the next 2 rows together once more. So getting started on every even number row, chain 2 and flip our work. Now getting started on our row 4, it's always going to start with 1 half double crochet. And now to do our dividing stitch, we're just going to do the dividing stitch into our previous even number rows, front post extended double crochet to get a really nice ribbing. So we're going to yarn over, find the front post extended double crochet from our previous even number row and insert your hook underneath the body of that stitch. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through, and then this part is going to be per usual, yarn over, pull through the first loop, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And that is our front post extended double crochet. And then just like how we did our row 2, we are going to skip that following stitch because this front post stitch counts as that stitch, and into the stitch right after that, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, a single and a double, so a Suzette stitch set. And now we're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch set until we have 2 stitches left. We are at the end of our row 4. We should all have 1, 2 stitches left. So now let's do our dividing stitch. So yarn over, inserting your hook underneath the extended front post double crochet from our previous row, pull through, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And to close off our even number row, insert with a half double crochet into that last stitch. And let's get started on our row 5, which is going to be exactly the same as our row 3. So chain 2 and flip our work, and start every odd number row with 2 half double crochets. So into that first stitch and into the stitch right after that, we should have 2 half double crochets. Then skip that following stitch into the stitch right after, our first Suzette stitch set, and continue on with our Suzette stitch sets until we have 2 stitches left. Now at the end of every odd number row, we should have 2 stitches left. We're just going to be putting 1 half double crochet into that last stitch. So yarn over, skip over that second to last stitch and into the last, insert with a half double crochet. And now we should all have our first 5 rows finished. So let's all chain 2, flip our work, and from here it's going to be a repeat of row 4 and 5 until we get the height of the piece that we want. So placing this first row where we want the bottom of this top to be, so you can make this cropped or full length, and continuing on with our repeat of row 4 and 5 until we reach about mid-chest, because that's going to be the depth that we'd like for this neckline to be. And I'll meet you back right after an even number row. I am back and my Suzette stitch detail is all finished. I have a total of 44 rows. My height is just about 14.5 inches or 38 centimeters. And now we're going to clean up the edges and we're going to get started on the side panels. So since we are along the top, what we're going to do is place our Suzette stitch detail, so this last row that we have right where we want it to sit for our neckline, so mine is about mid-chest, and then we're going to make a chain that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulder. I needed a total of 6 inches or 15 centimeters, so I made a chain of 25, and now we're going to do a single crochet row down our chain and down the side of our Suzette stitch detail. So once when we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and now we're going to put 1 single crochet into every chain. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, pull through 2, and continue with 1 single crochet into every chain. Now that we've put 1 single crochet into every chain, we're now going to work down the sides of our Suzette stitch detail, alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So let's all start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. We might need to pull it apart a little bit, but this is my second. So I'm going to insert my hook in through there with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, and then there's 2. Let's do that again. This is my following side row. So in through there with just 1 single crochet. This is my following side row, in through there with 2 single crochets. And that's it. Continue this to reach the end of the row. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut. So my chain and my single crochet row is all finished. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other side before we get started on the side panels, just so that we have the cleanest look. So as you guys can see, we're looking at the front of our single crochet row. So on this side, we're going to do our chain, reinsert our hook along the bottom, and then single crochet back all the way up, even into our chain, to still see the front of our single crochet. So to do our chain first, we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch, and then start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made on this side. So for me, 25. So my chain is now finished, and I did cut after my last chain. From here, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of our Suzette stitch detail, and then working our way up the side of our Suzette stitch detail, alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets, working our way all the way up, and then 1 single crochet into every chain. Once we reach that last chain, do a chain up of 1 and cut. We just want to double check and make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides, because working into that last chain, we could accidentally skip the last one, leaving us with 1 less stitch than this first side. So make your way all the way up with this single crochet row, and then I will meet you back. So now that we have just finished up the chains on both sides of our Suzette stitch detail, we're now going to work on the left side's shoulder panel. So making sure that our Suzette stitch detail is faced right side up, meaning the detail that we have is faced up towards us, and the chains that we made are furthest away from us, we're going to be inserting our same 5mm hook into the top corner stitch of the left side. So into this top corner right over here. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, we just need the height. And all we're going to do is a half double crochet row all the way down. So just do the first one, we're going to yarn over, find that first stitch, which is probably the stitch that a chain 2 is coming out of. And we're going to insert with a half double crochet, and we're going to put 1 half double crochet into every stitch. So our half double crochet row is all finished up, and now our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row to get some really nice ribbing. So at the end of our back loop half double crochet row, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. So to do our back loop slip stitches, we're all going to find that last stitch from our previous row, insert our hook into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, and gently yarn over and pull through everything. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and then again into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. And continue doing this until you don't have any more stitches left to work into. And just as a really quick tip, make sure that you're not tugging too tightly after every slip stitch, otherwise the following row can be too tight to work into. So I've made my way all the way up with my back loop slip stitches, and now from here we're just going to repeat our back loop half double crochet row and back loop slip stitch row until we get a shoulder portion that reaches the corner of our underarm. So getting started on our following half double crochet row, we're all going to chain 2 and flip our work. And now this half double crochet row, we're all going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop with a half double crochet. That gives us our really nice ribbing, and just continue with one back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then continue to repeat these 2 rows. I'll meet you back right after a back loop half double crochet row so we can get started on the underarm. So we are back with our shoulder portion. I have a total of 5 rows. That is not including my first single crochet row. So just to count it with you, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this width is just about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters. And we should have ended right after a half double crochet row, so along the bottom. And now we're going to do our underarm portion, which is still going to be back loop slip and back loop half double crochet rows, but now we're going to curve it underneath our underarm. So getting started on our underarm, first things first, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into the stitch that we have that is nearest to the corner of our underarm. Now the stitch that's nearest to the corner of my underarm is my 25th stitch from the top. That's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. That is the same amount of chains that I made that led all the way up to my shoulder, but it doesn't need to be the same chain, just as long as it's nearest to the corner of your underarm. And now from here, we're going to be putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches right before our stitch marker so we can do a decrease together. So I've made my way all the way up with my back loop slip stitch row. We have left 2 stitches right before our stitch marker, and now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. So how we do that is insert our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, and then into that last stitch's back loop. And when we have those 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. And that's our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. Our following row is going to be another half double crochet row, but now since we're along the top right here, we're going to start it with a decrease. So chain 2 and flip our work. So getting started on our decrease of 2 back loop half doubles, we're all going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through. Into that next stitch's back loop, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, then put 1, then yarn over, pull through all 4. And now from here, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And that's it. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have an underarm portion that can stretch, because we do want the body of this portion to be fitted over to the middle of our underarm. And I'll meet you back right after a half double crochet row. But at the end of this row, just chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 just so we can decrease together once more. So I've put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 just so we can do 1 more decrease together. So let's all start by inserting our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through into that last back loop, yarn over, pull through all 3, and let's just do our decrease of 2 back loop half doubles together as well. So chain 2 and flip our work. To do our decrease, we're all going to yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, second stitch's back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And like I said, continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have an underarm portion that can stretch over to mid underarm, making sure that we end on a half double crochet row. This is actually going to be my last row for my underarm, so right after this row, I'm going to do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back so we can get started on the other side. I am back. The first side of my front panel is all finished. I have a total of 9 rows. Remember, that's not including that first single crochet row. And this width is 2 inches or 5 centimeters, or now my total width is 9.5 inches or 22 centimeters. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did on this side. It's going to be the same idea, but we're actually going to have to start it on the bottom because the ribbing that we have isn't reversible. So what we're going to do on the right side of our side panel is we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of our Suzette stitch detail. So now that our hook is into the bottom corner stitch, we're now going to do our back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows. And this is going to be the shoulder, so remember this isn't going to have any increases or decreases. And we're going to be doing those rows for the same amount of rows that we have for the first shoulder portion on the other side. So just to get that started, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, we just want the height. And for this first half double crochet row, just put 1 half double crochet into every stitch. And at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then the row after that, 1 back loop half double into every stitch. Continue to repeat those 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we have the same amount of shoulder rows as the first one. Once we do, we will end along the top. So when we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. Alright, so I am back and I've just finished up my second shoulder portion, and now we're going to do our underarm. Now this underarm is actually going to be done a little bit differently than this one because we did end along the top, so we did have to do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of stitch markers that we inserted into for this side because we need both to be even. So for those of you that have my numbers, I inserted my stitch marker into the 25th stitch on this side, so I did the same thing on this side. And now from here we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our stitch marker stitch, but working down towards the bottom. So let's flip our work over so that we can get the same back loop slip stitch ribbing. So we're going to be inserting our hook into that next stitch that we have that's right next to our stitch marker, working down towards the bottom and making sure that it's in through that back loop only so that we get that pretty ribbing that we have for all the other rows. Now we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and now we're going to start with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches, and we're going to start by inserting our hook into that same stitch that our chain 1 is in. So into that same stitch's back loop, insert your hook, pull through, and then into that following stitch's back loop as well. When we have those 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, just like that. That is our first stitch for this row, and that is a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. From here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and at the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2 so we can decrease together. So we finished up our first underarm row, which was our slip stitch row, and we made our way back up with our back loop half double crochet row, leaving the last 2. Now we're just going to do 1 more decrease together. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, chain 1 to start our back loop slip stitch row, and flip our work. And now, just as a refresher, start this row off with a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches, so into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, next stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles. From there, continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the first underarm that we did, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back. My second underarm portion is all finished up, and now ready to get started on our back. Now, just as a really quick reference, the total width that I have is 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to start working on the back panel's width. So basically the same width that we have from our first shoulder row all the way across to our last shoulder row. So what we're going to want to do is make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last shoulder row. So that's going to be the amount of stitches that we skipped plus all the amount of stitches that we have working our way all the way down as well. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 91 stitches. So I'm going to make a chain of 91, but I actually already have mine all finished up, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. So now that we have our chain all finished up, we're going to do our first half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and we're just going to put 1 half double crochet into every chain, starting with that chain that we blocked off or the 3rd chain from our hook. And continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. So now that we've put 1 half double crochet into every chain, our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row to match the ribbing that we have for the front panel. So right after our half double crochet row, just chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And now that we've put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, our following row is going to be a back loop half double crochet row, so chain 2, Flip our work and just put one back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat our back loop half double crochet row and our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases until we have a similar width to our front panel from shoulder to shoulder. So like I said, I already have the width of my back panel all finished up. I have a total of 29 rows, and as you guys can see, if I place my back panel on top of my front panel, my back panel width is nearly the same width that I have from my first all the way over to my last shoulder row. Now my width is a total of 7 inches or 17 centimeters, and that's a total of 29 rows. And we want to make sure that once we have the width of our back panel finished, we want to meet back right after a half double crochet row so that we can work straight into the underarm portion from there. Once we have the width of our back panel finished, what we're going to do now is repeat our first underarm portion that we did. So along the top, which is the opposite from where our hook should be, we're going to count out the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started with this first underarm portion. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 25 stitches for the front. So over here, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into the 25th stitch and then repeat the same underarm portion as the first underarm portion that we did for the same amount of rows. When we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And if you need a reference on what we did for the first one, all of those timestamps will be linked in the description. So go ahead and get that one done, and then I'll meet you back. So I am back. My first underarm portion is all finished, and now I have a total of 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to close off our back panel with the same underarm portion that we did for the second underarm portion. So after this one, we did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Along this other blunt end, we're going to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we inserted into for this side, so 25, 25 for me. And then from there, we're going to flip our work over, insert our hook into the stitch that's nearest to our stitch marker stitch, working down towards the bottom, and then start with a back loop slip stitch row that starts with a decrease of 2, and then a back loop half double crochet row that ends on a decrease of 2. Continue on with that until we have the same amount of underarm rows as all of our other ones, then do a chain up of 1 and cut. I'm back, and the entirety of my back panel is all finished. I have a total of 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters, and now from here we're going to seam the front and the back panel together. So we're going to keep our back panel face right side up towards us, meaning the ribbing that we have is up towards us. Then we're going to grab our front panel and place the ribbing that we have for our front panel down for the back, because the single crochet seam that we're about to do is going to be along the inside when we flip it right side out. We're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're then going to insert our yarn onto our hook, and we're going to do our single crochet seam. So pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. So working into our side rows, we're going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side half double and 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch. So finding our first side row, it should be a side half double crochet for everyone. Insert into that top loop within the front panel. Find the same top loop within the back panel and single crochet to connect it. Like I said, we're going to be doing 2 single crochets into every side half double, so we're going to be putting 1 more into the same top loop within the front and within the back panel. Should be a little bit easier since it should all be gathered together, and do 1 single crochet. And now that we've worked into our side half double, we're now going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row. So find that next side row. It's this row right over here. Find that top loop and insert with 1. Find the next side row within the back panel. This is mine right here. Should be a side slip stitch row. Insert into that top loop with 1. And that's it. We're going to continue to do that until we don't have any more stitches left to work into within the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. Alright, so we are back. We have just finished up seaming our shoulders. Now we're going to seam up our side. And our side seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row, so we have more ribbing. So what we're going to do is flip our work right side out now, meaning the detail that we have for the front panel and the ribbing is along the outside. Same thing for the back, that's along the outside as well. And then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now let's do our outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. Then we're all going to find that next available stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3 of those loops. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, yarn over, pull through all 3, and just once more, next stitch into the front panel, into the front loop, next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, pull through all 3. And we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then we're going to repeat on the other side. Okay, so we have just finished up seaming the entirety of our sides, and now we're ready to get started on our sleeve. But first we're going to need to single crochet around everything. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're all going to be inserting our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam, and then we're going to work up our side rows. So what we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, and then once we reach our regular stitches, so working our way up our shoulder, 1 single crochet into every stitch. And then we are going to be inserting our stitch markers into the last stitch that we have before our shoulder seam, and then the first stitch that we have on the other side of our shoulder seam, so we know where our 2 middle stitches are. So let's get started on our side rows. We are all going to chain 1 and find our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook, and for those of you that are like me, you have some tail ends, and if you would like to weave them in as you go ahead and just place your tail end over your hook, and then single crochet around everything. Let's do the next one. Since we're in a side half double, we're going to be putting 1 more single crochet into the same side row, so find that top loop, and single crochet. And just to do our side slip stitch row as well, this is my side slip stitch row, find that top loop, go ahead and insert your hook with 1 single, and that's it. We're going to continue to put 2 single crochets into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, and then 1 single crochet into every stitch, working our way up our shoulder. And I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left to work into right before we reach our shoulder seam. So I've just made my way up with my single crochet row, and I have worked into my last single crochet that I have right before my shoulder seam, and I inserted my stitch marker into that last stitch. Now into that next available stitch that we have, which is actually going to be on the other side of our shoulder seam, we're going to insert our stitch marker into there as well. So just find that next available stitch, insert with a single crochet, and make sure you're inserting your stitch marker into there so we know where our middle stitches are. And then continue on with our single crochet row all the way down. Make sure that we have the same amount of stitches on both sides of our stitch markers, then slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so our single crochet row is all finished. Now we're ready to get started on the length of our sleeve. So first things first, we're all going to switch out to our 6mm hook now to give us a little bit more of a puffier puff sleeve. And now we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. So you can make this short, 3/4, or long. I'd like for mine to be long. So I need a total of 16 inches or about 41 centimeters. So I made a chain of 60. And now that we have our chain, we're going to do a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now we're going to yarn over and do a half double crochet into that chain that we blocked off. So go ahead and insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. And continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one so we can increase together. Alright, so we've made our way all the way down our chain with our half double crochets, leaving the last one. Now let's do our increase. So let's all yarn over. Into that last chain that we have, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half double crochets. So there's 1, and then into that same last chain with a second half double crochet. That is our increase. And now that we're here, we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So we're going to find that next available stitch into the base and insert into there with a slip stitch. And now that it's slip stitched, that slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch, by the way. We're going to slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base to work up to our next row. So slip stitch into that next stitch. That slip stitch also doesn't count as a stitch. We just needed to work our way up to the following row. Flip our work, and now we're just going to be doing back loop half double crochets starting with an increase. So we're always going to be doing an increase of 2 into the stitch that's nearest to the base. So let's all yarn over, find the last stitch from our previous row, not into those slip stitches, and do an increase of 2 back loop slip stitches, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one so we can increase and connect it once more. Okay, so we are nearly finished with our 3 rows. At the end of our row 3, we should have just 1 stitch left, and we're going to do another increase and connect together. So into that last stitch's back loop, we're going to insert with 2 half double crochets. So there's my increase of 2 back loop half doubles into that last stitch, and now we're just going to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch in through there, and now our odd number row is connected, and we're going to work our way up to the following row as well since we're here. So slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, start it with an increase of 2 back loop half doubles, and then continue to repeat these 2 rows, making our way all the way up until we reach our first stitch marker. Once we do, I will meet you guys back so I can show you how we're going to do the second half of our sleeve. I am back and I have just finished up the increase side of my sleeve. I am now at my stitch marker, so now we're going to do the same thing that we did on this side, but instead of increases, decreases into the stitches nearest to the base. So I have actually ended along my base, so what I'm going to do is slip stitch into my next available stitch, flip my work, and we're going to start our decrease together. But for those of you that have ended along the outside, what you are going to do is chain 2, flip your work, and then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2, and then I'll meet you back in the next clip so that we can do that row together as well. So for those of us that have ended along the base, what we are going to do is slip stitch into that next available stitch. So for me, that is that stitch marker stitch, and then flip our work. So whenever along the base, all we're going to do is yarn over, insert our hook into that first stitch into the base. So whenever we're along the base, what we're going to do is yarn over, insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through, and then into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, and now from here put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last 2. So we are back. For those of us that ended along the base, we started the following row off with a decrease, finished off our back loop half double crochet row. At the end of the row, we chain 2, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch again, leaving the last 2. Now what we're all going to do from here is yarn over. We're all going to start by inserting our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, and then also into that last stitch's back loop. Then once we have those 4 loops on our hook, then we're going to yarn over, pull through, and when we have those 4 loops, yarn over, pull through all 4. And that's it. We're going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing. So into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch, and now this row is connected. And just to get started on the following row together, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, start the following row off with a decrease of 2 back loop half doubles, and then 1 back loop half double into every stitch. Continue on to repeat these 2 rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam our sleeve together and then get started on the cuff. So we have made our way all the way around with our decrease side of our sleeve. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it together, and this is going to be a single crochet seam. So let's flip our work wrong side out. So now that our work is flipped wrong side out, we're going to do a single crochet seam. So start by inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're going to do our single crochet seam. So find that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet. Again, first stitch into the front, first stitch into the back, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So our sleeve is all seamed up and ready to get started on our cuff. So let's all start by inserting our 5mm hook into the bottom of our sleeve, making sure that our sleeve is now flipped right side out. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now what we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every other side row, because obviously our sleeve is a pretty decent size right now. So let's all start by finding our first side row. I'm just going to insert mine into the same side row that my chain 1 is in, that I inserted my hook into, and I'm going to single crochet once. I'm going to skip that following side row and into the one right after that, another single crochet. And just to do another one, skip our following side row and then another single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way around and then slip stitch into that chain space. My single crochet row is all finished up, and we are now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I made a chain of 10. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do a slip stitch row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, and that's it. Let's do one more. Into that next chain, insert your hook, gently pull through everything, and continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain to reach the end of the row. We've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, and now we're going to connect it into the base. So into that next available stitch we have into the base, go ahead and slip stitch it into there, yarn over, pull through everything. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch, flip our work, and we're now going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So connecting it into the base is actually going to be done exactly the same way that we did the sleeves, and for the cuff it's just going to be all back loop slip stitches with no increases and no decreases, and that's basically it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into, and when we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam, so the same seam that we did for the sides. So just to do the first one, since we already know how to do this, make sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up, and we're all going to find that first available stitch and insert only in through that front loop. Then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through all 3 loops. And we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we have just finished up our cuff, and now what we're going to do is repeat everything we just did here on the other side. And once we have that, we are just going to weave in all of our ends because we are all done. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all in the next one. Bye!